All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started here, and I appreciate everybody joining in, and also I really appreciate Bishop Myokei Shonin for her willingness to join with us and give us a little talk about some of the things that she has a lot of passion about, and also some expertise as well. So, and we have Jim, as I mentioned earlier, who's joined us from Florida, and Laurel from New York. And we might ask Laurel about her snow. I think this is the first time you've met these. Huh?
I know Jim.
Okay.
Well.
Okay, good.
Yes.
But this is your first time with Laurel, right?
No, I don't think so.
Huh? Oh, okay, y'all. Okay, good. Good. Your hair is. Your hair.
Came on my radio show.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes. Your hair is interesting.
But my hair?
Yeah.
It was cold. You know I don't like cold.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, I will quit babbling, and I'll let you fill in all the blanks with your own personal introduction as well, and let you run the show. But you're being recorded.
Well, okay, personal introduction. Let's see. Who am I? Myokei Caine-Barrett. Everybody knows this stuff already.
But it'll be on YouTube, and people might not know.
And I'm a Japanese African American descent. And so that particular fact is part of the reason that I think I'm passionate about diversity issues and Buddhism, because the diversity issues led me to deeper study into Buddhism, which then again led me back to studying more about diversity. And so I think since for the last 25 years or so that I've been engaged in diversity work and trainings and really trying to open up spaces for everybody to be welcome, particularly with respect to Buddhist groups, because every time I go to big events that are purportedly for all Buddhists, the number of people of color is usually quite small. And also in the past, it has been the case that the number of LGBTQ folks are also quite small. And some of that's changing as people are beginning to understand more and more about the need to have diversity. I think just from my own personal perspective that diversity in a community makes it much richer. It makes it much stronger. And it really strengthens the ties among folks as they begin to confront the areas where they separate themselves. And this is something all of us do. It's not particular to any group or ethnicity or gender or identity. You know, all of us tend to separate because we're trying to protect ourselves. And so one of the things we often talk about when we start talking about diversity is, what about you? What is it about you that you have to abandon or leave outside the space that you enter so that you can be safe? The other question is, what would you like people to know about you so that you can be safe? And those are the kind of questions that we often don't ask ourselves. We just go through the experience and try to keep, ourselves together. I'll give you an example. When I went to the 2011 meeting, it was a very white, very much academic approach, because most of the people involved were either inside or with, the John Kabat-Zinn folks, and then the Jack Kornfield folks. And there were a few scatterings of those of us who were Mahayana Buddhists, and then the Bhikshus and Bhikshunis. And so there are a lot of issues that are floating around encountering monks and nuns, or bhikshus and bhikshunis, who believe that we are simply lay people who wear robes. And they have a tendency to dismiss us as being ordained, or that we've taken any kind of vows at all, because we're from a school that allows us to get married and have relationships and have children. And so there's a tendency, especially in the West, not necessarily in the East, but in particular in the West, to kind of segregate. And that happened to me at that meeting, and I remember asking the woman who said something to me about it, was who gave her the authority to come and examine what was happening in my bedroom, so she could judge the level of my commitment to my faith. So, and it happens quite regularly. Then again, there's also the fact that the majority of experience, and I know you've seen more than likely on the internet lately, the images of Buddhism that we tend to see are the young, gorgeous white folks in wonderful clothes, and their airbrushed hair, and their bodies, and their made up, and they're all sitting there meditating in these poses, which for most of us, those poses don't exist in our sadhanas, nor do the clothing and the hand mudras that they're using. And so the particular vision of what we look like as being sold to the public doesn't match with what we look like. So every time you go to a gathering, you're likely as not to find anybody that looks like you, that is like you. And this is what makes, I think, our particular form of Buddhism so unique, because there is a tendency for us to be able to find each other. And a lot of it, I believe, is based on some of the cultural concepts that we use. We talk about itai doshi. We talk about ichinen sanzen, and those kinds of things. I don't think I've heard anybody else speak of those particular concepts as Buddhist. And so when I examine those from the standpoint of diversity, the 10 worlds, I think, is very significant for us to consider. Also the 10 aspects. Because when we look at those are characteristics that all of us have. There's no difference. And the more we delve into some of these concepts, the more we see that the kind of suffering and end of suffering that the Buddha talks about are present for all of us. They're included in all of these concepts, and we can use them to really talk about diversity. And especially when we think about the idea of mutual possession of these ideas, like the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. So, what comes up for you based on what I just said? Let me close the door. Anybody?
Well, having been through the exercise at Omega this past summer, I'm familiar with the notion, and it's something that maybe the others have thought about, but I had not really thought about it using those terms of what do I have to leave out in order to be accepted in other groups? What part of me can I not bring freely to other places and still be me?
Yes.
And for most, a big part of it up until the last few years when I, just decided to hell with everybody. Being gay was one thing that had to be left out of the conversation in order to be accepted into groups.
Yeah.
I used to find that when I would go to a Christian be accepted in, and then after a while it would be, you're 60 years old and you've never been married, and after a while you could kind of get the gist that they were starting to figure out this, and it was like this, they're retracting instead of making you part of our, we don't care, you're part of the congregation. You always felt like you were, well, we've got a singles group, we'll get you hooked up with somebody. It's like, I'm fine, I don't have to be hooked up with somebody, but there's that inclination that you, if you gay or straight, you gotta have a significant other. You just can't, you can't be one leg of a pair of pants. You can't be one piece of a pair of scissors. You have to be, there's gotta be two of you. And so it's kind of a misconception, and I'm fine, I'm one of these people that, I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. Right, and this is the concept that I feel a lot of people can't deal with. They don't want to be with themselves. Or something I don't like. I'm just trying to divorce myself if I could. But one of the things I find about Buddhism is that there's a lot of misconceptions. I used to, when I was in the service, and it would come out that I was Buddhist. People would go, "Well, where's your statue of your little fat man?" And so like, no, we're not at the Chinese restaurant. And then you show them the scroll. At that time, I was with the NSA group at that time, and it just didn't ring true. And it was like, well, we're going to go out to eat. Can you go out with us because you don't eat meat? I said, how do you know I don't eat meat? And I saw a fellow the other day that had a T-shirt on that said, "I have the body of a god. Unfortunately, it's Buddha." And I said, I'd like to correct you on that. The Buddha was actually very slender. He was a wiry, athletic, almost starved himself to death. I said, yeah, I don't mean to cut the joke, but that's one of the misconceptions. My mom used to do the same thing. She would introduce me to somebody like when I go with her to church. And this is my son Jim, and he worships the little fat man. And he was like, the what? And I said, Mom, we can't worship him. He's not a god. He's a teacher. But there's so many misconceptions, and I just feel sometimes, it's like I almost feel like I just don't know. I can't do this all by myself. I can't heal the world. I do hope I didn't take over the conversation.
No.
As you remember, I have a knack of being able to do that.
Well, I'm glad that you resurfaced. I appreciate that. How about you, Laura?
I feel like a bad check. It keeps coming back.
I don't think I leave anything of myself out wherever I go. I think I have different parts of myself. Like I'm in corporate. When I'm in corporate, I'm fortunate. I work in corporate, but my office is it's much more laid back. I'm not in the main office, so we don't have to be so strict. I have a wide variety of friends that have grown up in the city. So a lot of things, when I go other places, when I go visit my family around Christmas, that's always a trip because my family is Caribbean. My grandfather was, I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, my family is, and my grandfather was the Baptist minister on the island, and he was like the minister. So for me to be a Buddhist is like, they just don't know what to do with me. My aunt is 80, and I go stay with her. She's actually forbidden me to chant in her house. Wow. So that's always interesting. So I go see my cousin Tony, he's laid back, we drum together, we hang out. I do stay with him. But I think I'm at a point in my life where I'm just myself, So I told my aunt, I love you, I'm going to come stay, but I'm going to stay with my cousin Tony. So they didn't believe me last Christmas, and I actually stayed with him. And they were just blown away that I wasn't with them. I said, no, I'm myself, I'm a Buddhist, and this is what I do every day. So I can be with you and chant, or I cannot be with you, but you can't have it both ways. I said, but I'll see you Christmas Day, and I'm going to go do my thing, and I'm going to chant every day like I always do, and I wish you well, So that's the only area in my life where I think it's a little weird to be. They're so, like I don't know how to describe, like super Christians. Like all they talk about is Jesus. Every other word is praise the Lord. It's really fascinating to me that there's, but it's, I think that's the one area in my life where I feel like, wow, I'm not allowed to really be the full morale that I would like to be around my cousins. So it's kind of weird because I just had a big family reunion in 2013 and I hadn't seen them in like 20 years. So to be around them and be trying to get to know them, but not really to be able to be my full self, that's a little disconcerting. I really don't like that.
Yeah. But do you have a sangha that is quite open for you?
That would be us.
I'm in Reverend Myosho-ji. I used to be SGI, and I'm trying to get to go to a temple anyway, so it's a
Yeah.
choice to relax on a Sunday, meet everyone online, and have these discussions and talk about things from a Buddhist perspective. So I would say yes, yes.
Okay, good, good. You're very fortunate, as I think we all are. Because one of the major things I think both Jeff is Shonin and I noticed when we were at Omega was how very white it was, and just how people didn't know how to have the conversation.
And might I say, a little bit upper class-ish, a little
Yes,
bit wealthy-ish, people of means and resources, as opposed to Myokei and myself with almost poverty level.
Well, and I remember meeting a Japanese woman who classified herself as white because of her economic condition, because she was quite well off. So she didn't feel that her experience could be relevant to a person of color and enough to classify herself as a person of color.
So she was too rich to be Japanese, is what you were saying?
Essentially, because she didn't grow up in Japan, she grew up in Europe.
Oh, okay, okay.
So she was, I think, a diplomat's daughter or something like that. So she grew up quite wealthy and just in very different circles from most folks.
Another thing,
What?
Laurel, you would start to speak.
I was actually rather Myokei.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, and also the chanters versus the non-chanters, the vocal Buddhist versus the ones who never pretend that they say anything, and your efforts to get some space for those people who recite sutra and chant at Omega was a first, I believe, right?
I think so. Because it's something that I think is very curious, that Buddhism is spread as, number one, it's Zen, so that leaves most of us out. And number two, it's always silent. But everywhere else you go, Buddhism is not silent. Everybody chants. And I think that's one of the things that unite most Buddhists in the world. And the silence is just something that, well, some people may dabble in, but most people do chant. Even the Zenis chant, but they don't chant like we do. In fact, my friend here in Houston, who's a Zen Buddhist, whenever her members ask about chanting, she sends them to me. And she says, we are the expert chanters in the world of Buddhism, because we really know how to do it well. But it's very interesting when you think about chanting. And this is one thing that I've been working on lately, because the idea of chanting as a vehicle for bringing communities together is one I think that hasn't been really explored. Because when you sit together in silence, yes, you can share vibes and all that kind of stuff, but you never really interact with each other. And what I found in dealing with Buddhism here in the West is that people who sit or walk in silence tend to ignore everybody else around them. And even when you're in silence in Japan, which we did do on occasion, there was no idle conversation or just frivolous stuff that you do, but, well-focused silence that everybody. It didn't ignore everybody. And I went to the Berry Center in Massachusetts, and one of the things I noticed was that people acted like if you intruded on their space that you were messing with them, and they couldn't just bow to you. And whereas in the East, if people are being silent and walking or sitting, they acknowledge other people coming into the space simply by just bowing to another person to say, I see you. And that really speaks to that connection that we're supposed to be developing among ourselves. And what I find with chanting, because we have to listen to each other, we have to harmonize with each other, we have to be in rhythm with each other, that it is, in essence, kind of walking into a space where you just kind of connect automatically. even if you're not aware of it, that you are connecting to all these other people around you so that your voices can be working together, so that the sound becomes very beautiful. And when I think about, as a young Buddhist, we used to chant 24-hour tozos or 1 hour and then call somebody on the phone and they do the other hour. But how that connected you to each other. And the people that I did that with are still friends today, you know, even though we're in different paths, but we did all this stuff together based on chanting. We didn't talk to each other about, oh, this is my life, blah, blah, blah. We chanted together. And because of that, we got to be very close. And I think that's the part that's missing when people talk about silent meditation. And that's also the part that gets missed when you start talking about bringing a diverse group of people together. How do you cross bridges when you leave them in place? You know, or, you know, tear down the walls of separation when you leave them in place. You can cross a bridge when you're singing together, when you're chanting together, when you're drumming together. All of those things start to happen without regard to what that person does, who that person is, anything like that. You don't have to pay attention to the personal qualities. And when we talk about Buddhism as the vehicle for all of us to change our lives, the one thing that unites us is our refuge in the three treasures. And the Sangha is one, I think, that is most often ignored in terms of how we focus attention on it, what we do about it. The Sangha, you know, is not really constructed just by sitting silently together. And I think you see it with Thich Nhat Hanh, excuse me, the way his Sangha gets together and they walk slowly together and they really are close, in close contact, touching, but they also chant together and they harmonize together. And those things allow the bridge of diversity to be crossed quite easily. And I think that's something that we really have to look at in terms of how we embrace different concepts with our practice. And one of the things I think that sometimes we leave out those, because we all grew up in the same old tradition, but we all learned faith, practice, and study. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. You know, people forget about that. They think it's all about practice, 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 practice. But if you don't have the study part, and if you don't have the faith part, and just have the practice, you have the situation that you see today, that I'm a Vipassana, I'm a Dharma punk, I'm a mindfulness only school or whatever, and you're not, kind of thing. I think we encountered that kind of experience. And people frankly don't know what to do with people who chant. They really don't. And when I was in, where was I? Sri Lanka, there I met a Japanese priest, and he was in hysterics because he was laughing about the fact that we were a school that was dedicated to chanting the title of a book. And, you know, he thought that was hysterical. And there's nothing you could say to him that would make him even consider why that would be important. It's kind of interesting. I had never run into anybody who thought that was so hysterical. So when we consider diversity, though, we also have to not be afraid to talk about it, to engage each other. And you see that happening a great deal today. Especially, I've noticed more and more people trying to have a conversation about Black Lives Matter, about white privilege, all of those things, and really trying to get a handle on that. And so one of the ways that we can do that, and I'm not going to go into them in depth this time because I really like to devote next time to managing the conflict. But when we manage conflict about racial or gender-based or however, diversity, that we have to be mindful. And that's the other thing that a lot of times we don't think about. I know it's very difficult for me because when I first started training about diversity, one of the major groups of people I have trouble with are white women. Because a lot of my experience with white women has been whiny white women. And, you know, people would say things like, oh, well, I have to go to work and it's so hard for me because I'm a single mom. And it was like, well, so is everybody else. Deal with it. You know, we don't have to complain. This is just what your life is, so deal with it. And I've always had difficulty with that. So much so that my teacher in diversity training was so aware of it that he forced me to go to lunch with a woman who was perceived as the biggest whiner in the group. And we all had to go to dinner with somebody that we didn't know. And it really taught me a lot because what I consider whining, people are just telling their stories. And this woman had incredible stories, an incredibly difficult life that made my life look like a piece of cake. Because her entire family had this very rare form of cancer that picked off everyone, but in the last two remaining were her and her brother. And her spirit was so powerful in trying to manage that, as well as to work really diligently and with a great deal of passion on bringing diversity to her school. So it was like, okay, I got it, you know. But a lot of times we never think about that, what other people's stories are. Because when we know someone's story, then we can really look at the whole idea about life is suffering. Because we all have that in common. And no matter what kind of suffering, it's not my suffering worse than yours or better than yours. It's just that we all suffer and we're all trying to just deal with it and walk through life with as much dignity and grace as we possibly can. And so the way we do that is really by paying attention and really meeting people where they are. For the most part, we don't judge people by who they are, but who we think they are. And most of that comes from who we are. We judge them according to who we are. And because of that, we tend to miss things. And they might be things that we're judging that we don't like about ourselves that we see in other people, and so we feel it's quite comfortable for us to judge them and find them lacking. And one of my pet peeves is that word tolerance. You know, you hear about racial tolerance or, you know, religious tolerance, and it really strikes me as being quite arrogant, because I find the question I want to ask is, what gives you the right to tolerate me? And who are you to tolerate anything? That I welcome your acceptance, but I reject your tolerance. And I know tolerance was an easy word for people to come up with. But it's one I absolutely reject, because I think full acceptance is what's important for us to develop. When I first left Soka Gakkai, I was in a very difficult place because there was nowhere to go. And I went to a religious science community. And that was like, one of my members calls it a hippie community, because they're very loving. You know, when you go to the church, they embrace you. There's a part of the service, in fact, where they walk around and they spend a good 30 minutes doing this, walking around saying, I'm grateful for the good in your life to each other. And they hug each other. And so if you're not used to that, that seems very strange. And when I first went out there, I was kind of freaking out because I thought, what's wrong with these people? You know, what do they want? And I realized after spending more and more time with them was that they really were about seeing the good in other people. And they were really about appreciating that intelligent enough or wise enough. All of the judgment was about not being enough. And that tends to wear on you. And I think especially when I first started, I was about 12 or 13 years old, so that's a terrible message to give to anyone, no matter what their age. But it penetrates very subtly, I think, on people to hear that they're not enough. And so this place was the most profound experience for healing, because no matter how crazy I was or how negative I was, someone would say to me, I'm grateful for the good in your life. And after a while, I started to be grateful for that as well. And there were people I just didn't like because they were too nice. And can you imagine not liking someone because they're too nice? Because you can't handle it, because you're not used to it. And there was a woman that for 2 years I didn't like her. And she was the sweetest, most charming woman I had ever met. And she always just loved me, always. And then one day she finally broke through my cold heart, and I was actually healed at that moment of that kind of idea that I was unlovable. And I think that's what people come to us for as well. And we have to be able to embrace all of it. And if we don't, then we are denying the truth of the faith that we practice. And that's why I think these concepts on Itai Doshi and Ichinen Sanzen are so critical for us to master. Because if we really believe that this Buddhism is the teaching of equality, then that means that it is for everyone and will work for everyone, and the effect is the great equalizer. Because I'm not, great shapes because I'm a priest or better than a layperson. I just have a different function. But all across the board, we all have Buddha nature that can be awakened. And if we bow to each other's Buddha nature, then we can create something different that doesn't have to be based on the superficial things that most relationships tend to be based upon. And I think that's very important, how we show up. From the very Christian perspective, because I have those kind of relatives too, that when my father died, they were like, oh, you're going to hell, you're chanting that weird stuff, you need to be praying to Jesus, And even some of the people I've met lately, especially people of color, which is very interesting because people of color tend to be very Christian, especially black folks. And sometimes it's really hard to talk to black Christians because the Lord will provide. And what I found is that our concepts are so much deeper that you can almost invariably talk rings around them about their own faith. And sometimes I think they need to hear it. Because the message of most Christians that I know has been about God providing, whereas we learn as Buddhists that we provide. Because based on our ability to open and change, that we're able to access better and greater parts of ourselves. And this is something I think that's really critical for us to be able to share with people so that they can understand that, how did the guy say, you can't, evangelize when you antagonize, something like that. There was a thing that came on about a black preacher who was really messing with his church people about homosexuality. And it was brilliant, it was beautiful. But we don't have room for hate. And we have to find the places where we can love each other and welcome each other and embrace each other fully through being mindful about our intention to treat each other well. And the first thing to always ask ourselves is, are we the mirrors for the people that show up? And are they mirrors for us? So we think of Buddhism as a practice that is based on relationships, how we relate to each other, how we relate to our environment. So are our hearts open? Are they inclusive? And to remember that we are all each other's teachers, and that we are also each other's demonstration in the world.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
With everything that's going on in the world, particularly, with so many, young black men being shot and killed, and the Black Lives Matter movement, as a Buddhist, how do you, and an African American and a woman, triple threat, how do you maintain not being angry for those moments of injustice? Like, how do you maintain that? And how do you encourage others that maybe aren't Buddhist to stay open and loving when you can be, there's a lot, I find a lot of hatred, like when I'm with my close friends, a lot of them are very angry and thinking about going back to the 60s with the whole, revolution. And I try to explain from a Buddhist perspective, but I would like to get your opinion on that. Like, how do you feel we can walk through the world as African Americans, and I'm sorry, or as people, rather than not African Americans,
Yeah.
and deal with that and stay open and loving? It's very challenging.
Oh yeah, because I'm angry as hell. Trust me. That there are days that I cry a lot because I'm just so angry. But the other thing is that what's most important for us is how we show up, even in our anger. That we can lend our voices, lend our beings to whatever manner of interaction we can make happen. Even with those who are so angry that they want to tear stuff up, is to be the voice of reason, be the voice of calm and quiet. I had an experience when I was younger after Kent State, and we were trying to close our school down. And people were angry, but back then in the hippie days, love, sex, and rock and roll kind of thing. But when trying to close down our school, people forgot that there were other people involved, the people who worked there. People had to take care of their families. And so that became my role, to be able to just say, wait a minute, if we block these buildings, these people can't get to work. So we have to do this differently. And surprisingly, finding that voice, because people actually listen to me. And I don't know why they listen to me, but it taught me that you can be angry and still be a voice of reason. That you can find better ways to express anger. We're taught that when we look at the 10 worlds, that our anger, based on Buddhism, based on Buddhahood, because each of the worlds contains the other 9, right? So as we practice, we shore up that Buddha nature within us, that Buddhahood. And so the lens that we view the world, even in anger, is quite different from somebody who doesn't have a foundation of Buddhahood. And so from that perspective, I think that we have the advantage of being able to perceive a different way through. Not to avoid, but find a way through the situation that is a win for both sides. And that's a difficult path to walk, because most of the people around you are those who are going to want drastic action. But it's more important, I think, to try and show up and be a light rather than to be a weapon. And all of us, even in the midst of our anger, can find some good in it. It's difficult, very difficult, because when I think of Tamir Rice, for example, that one has been with me for a while. And, you know, my tendency is to always say, there is some good here. There is something to be gained out of the situation. And it's the most horrible thing I can imagine as I look at my grandson who wants to play with toy guns. And I'm thinking, there's some good in here, no. And it's very hard to find, you know. But also at the same time, and I hate to think this way, that these kind of sacrifices, because that's what they are, they're sacrifices on some level to bring the world to a different place. Because, you know, people don't see each other. And how much younger do they have to get before people can see these children, these babies, and recognize that it could be their own? And it's the same like with what's happening in Flint, the refugees, that the biggest thing you hear coming out of the white communities lately has been about heroin. And heroin has been a problem for generations, but now that it's hitting the white suburbs, it's a problem, and money's going to it. And somehow, I think the only good that has come out of all of this stuff is a movement like Black Lives Matter. Is a movement where Black folks are saying, we don't have to take it anymore, that we don't deserve it, we've been quiet long enough, so it's time to do something. But there are alternatives. And I'm very proud of the folks in the Black Lives Matter movement because it has been nonviolent. It has been very thoughtful. And the latest one was a woman who stood up in front of Trump or whoever in silence and didn't say a word. And what could they do to her? Was that in Flint, wasn't it? But so people are coming out with a better part of themselves. And there's so much courage happening that we can see it, we can connect to it, and possibly be more inspired by it. So we don't have to think about, you know, riding for pumpkins or something like that. You know? So many things I think we don't know. When I heard about Baltimore and read about the conditions that people live in, for example, and then to find that the governor rescinded the funding for transportation from the hard-hit areas to where people could get jobs. You know, and it was like, what were you thinking? That these people need to get to work, they need to get to hospitals, they need to get wherever, and now you've decimated the transportation that was supposed to be coming to them. Okay, thank you. So we have situations where the inhumanity and the unwillingness to see the other as ourselves is, you know, being shown to the world. You know, so we are no longer that shining city on a hill, as it were, because we're facing the effects of our own innate arrogance as Americans that we try to spread all over the world, and now it's coming, as Malcolm said, chickens are coming home to roost. You know, that we have to do something different. And we have to show a way out of this situation that is not a, you know, somebody doesn't have to lose, that everybody can win. So I don't know if that answers your question. You know.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much, very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, I think to you know, add to that, the thing I most admire about the energy and the direction of conversation in the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's on their terms. they are making a concerted effort to stay engaged in conversation, but on their terms, as opposed to in the past, it's either had to be on the white person's terms or in violent opposition to the white person's terms. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement has said, you know, we can have this conversation on our terms and not be violent, and we can get our message across. And I think I contrast that with the Black Panthers movement, which I did admire and I did respect, and I have no regret saying that. But I'm much more respectful of the Black Lives Matter movement and the notion of this is our conversation on our terms, and you know, using our passion, anger, if you will, it may be, but our energies to say, no, I have a place as me at this table. I don't need to leave my voice out so that I listen to yours. And, you know, that's sort of the same concept that you brought up at the beginning. What do we leave out to be accepted in? And too often, I think the African American voice has been, not by choice, but it has been absent.
It's been defined by other folks. Very much. Other question?
I'm going to step away for a moment because I realize I didn't plug in my computer, and if I don't do that, it's going to all vanish. So keep going and let me just step away.
Okay. I think one of the things we all have to examine very carefully is the nature of our own internalized crap. You know, because we all have it. We don't think about it. You don't have any of that, right? Because I remember when I was teaching at a historically black college, and I came out one day and there was a group of young black men, and my first thought was, uh-oh. And then I thought, what the hell are you doing? You know, but then I realized that I had been brainwashed or initiated into thinking a certain way about seeing, you know, young black men congregating. But I also noticed that I had the same thing about young white bald-headed guys. Until I met a Buddhist. Yeah. Well, I had an interesting experience. A good friend of mine, I'm not sure we're good friends anymore, but she came to visit me one time, and she's Hawaiian and looks white, and her sons definitely look like white men. And they came to my house, and they in a car that had the Confederate flag on the back. I didn't know this, and they were in my driveway. And several of my neighbors called to make sure we were okay, because they saw these young white boys get out of the car with, you know, boots and bald head, and it was kind of funny. But I didn't realize until last year that this woman actually believes in, you know, the validity of that Confederate flag. It's like, wow. That's why I don't know if we're friends anymore because of that. And she's very angry about the fact that people want to take it down. Yeah. You know, and she's a Buddhist too, amazingly. But then it helps you realize that even Buddhists have these, you know, unexplored areas. It's kind of like Star Trek, you know, to boldly go where you haven't gone before. You know, we have to remember that. To really do that. It's difficult to be bold about doing that. You know, all those things that we've been indoctrinated with. I think back. When did you first notice that somebody was gay, for example? You know, I noticed 7th grade of my friends was a young gay boy. But it was never something that was, dismissed as negative in my family. But on the school bus, he caught a lot of grief. And when I look back on that, did I stand up for him? No, I did not. Because that's, again, learning how to find your voice.
I did once. I had a coworker ask me, Jim, when did you discover that you were gay? And I smiled and said, when did you discover you were straight?
Yeah.
It's not one of these things you suddenly wake up and say, I think I'm going to be a screaming queen. It just, there you are. The realization, and you don't have to be a screaming queen, you just be gay. But those of us who were raised a long time ago, that was most of it was their role model. Nowadays, it's you find somebody's gay and they'll go, I had no idea. That's because we have different role models now. You don't have to be, walk around swishing and have a limp wrist, and you can be gay, and people, you don't have to do that because it's not a societal thing that's implied. One of the things I do have a problem with sometimes is I feel like I'm shamed into silence on a lot of issues, especially being in older Central Florida, predominantly white, very, very conservative, very religious. Well, they call themselves religious, but it's almost a hypocritical type of religion thing. And sometimes you feel almost shamed into silence when they're talking about something, and you go, I don't feel I want to speak up because I don't want to get shot. And they will shoot you. They will hurt you. We do see, the other day we're at the gas station, and it pulls this old beat up truck with the wheels up to here, and a big little rebel flag hanging out the back of it, and I'm going, I don't want to tangle with these people because they're trying to make a statement, and I don't want to be the one to bring this out. But at the same time, when I see somebody like that, all I can think of is I feel sorry for them that they're so pathetically locked into that hate. They've got something in their life that they've been bred for so long that they don't think anymore. It just has become part of them. And I'm sorry to rattle, but I think where it is the frustration where you feel like I should say something, but I don't. Well, it's like during the Iraq War. You'd be watching something on TV, and you go, there are people being killed in there, and everybody would turn around, well, then you're for the terrorists. No, I'm not for the terrorists. I just don't think we should be there. We shouldn't be doing this. But the automatic assumption was, you're for the terrorists. And, if you don't speak up and say something, then it's presumed that you're supporting these wackadoos who don't belong in our society, and it's frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to stand up sometimes.
I also think that there are different ways and different times to employ different ways of standing up. We frequently, we have a little town right outside Charlotte called Gastonia, and weekly there are these parades of varying sizes of trucks with the flags and all of that stuff. And some of the chaplains we gathered together to talk about, what do we do in situations like that? And well, first off, your safety is important. The safety of any others around you is also important. And so taking that into consideration, there are different ways in which you might consider an appropriate response, based on your safety and the safety of people around you. And then there are other times when it's quite appropriate to speak out and just say, no, I don't believe that. And what we came up with in the situation down there was just leave. Don't give them an audience. Just show them your back. And quite frequently, that's a fairly powerful but understated statement, is to just show your back. Just, that's not me, that I don't participate in it. I'm not going to gawk. I'm not going to support it in any positive way, but I will just leave. And sometimes that's all you can do, that silent protest, the leaving, the woman that you mentioned earlier, and also the woman that stood up here in North Carolina to Trump, who was Muslim. Just silence. Silence cannot be silenced. Silence is as loud as it gets.
And they don't know what to do with that.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to make your voice heard. And there, as Jeff is saying, there's so many different ways to do it, and I love the idea of silence when people are acting stupid. Even though sometimes you want to get in there.
Yeah, you want to act stupid along with them.
Very important, very important. And part of learning how to manage conflict is to be able to understand what people are doing, what's triggering them.
And triggering you, and triggering yourself.
Yeah. So that you can address it. I mean, Shonin is a master at some of this stuff. I've seen him get people to do things that they thought they would never do, much to their detriment at times. But they're good at it. And a lot of times it's a well-placed question can move things, can change someone's mind, depending on what the question is.
I know what you're referring to. Classic.
Yeah. Very good. And there are. I have a series of 9 questions that can help you get started on managing conflict, which I will share with you on our next meeting.
Good.
But to really go into asking ourselves questions. What is home for you? What does that mean? What is home? And to really understand that, it's easy for us, all of us, to check out on other people. Have you experienced having someone check out on you? Kind of like disappear, even though they're standing in front of you? Some folks can do that. One example I had was when I was doing diversity training for the board of directors for Inside Meditation. One of them invited me to come to his home to have dinner with him and his significant other. It was a beautiful evening, had great conversation. It's very nice, very intimate, very warm. And the next day, I ran into him at the supermarket. He didn't know who I was for a moment. And it was like, wow. It felt like a physical blow. And that's what I mean by checking out. That, most of us can't do that. We can't afford to check out because it's too important for us to, show up, to be present. And for some folks, it's very easy, especially when dealing with people of color, to check out and not recognize that they just kind of overlooked you right there. And you see it in workplaces where people don't recognize the supporting staff, for example. One place I noticed it is at Costco, all the people that are sampling the product, most people don't talk to them. They just come by and grab the sample and walk off. Don't engage. But I think about how I would feel if I were working and people just walked by and grabbed the sample off my tray and kept on walking. I would not feel very good about being there. Things like that you can check out on that human connection that you've established or that you should establish so that people feel seen. Because we have a tendency not to see each other. And that's very detrimental for so many people. Even the cashier at the register when you're checking out at the store is just to acknowledge. Did you see that piece on Facebook about the young African American man at Target taking care of an elderly woman? And she was counting out her money and, shaking hands. And the lady behind her was really upset and being impatient because, she had to go and she'd had a bad day. And what she realized, when she slowed down and started to pay attention to check into the situation, was that this young African American male was dealing with this elderly white woman very tenderly and gently. And he took care of her. And he, didn't try to rush her, didn't roll his eyes or make fun of her. And what she noticed was that her daughter, that's been about 5 years old, was observing all of his behavior quite intently. And then that was when she realized that she herself, and especially her daughter, had been taught a lesson about how to deal with other people. So she was able to calm down. And, so the checking in is important to really connect to what's going on around you. And a lot of times we don't do that because we're too busy. We don't have time. And I got to get here and I got to get there. It's hard to slow down. Very much hard to slow down. But I think it's important for us to slow down. Others think.
I wanted to just share something at the beginning of the conversation, and because I've been paying attention so intently that I forget exactly what it was, but about the connection between silence and chanting. So this goes way back at the beginning of the conversation. And just today, a couple of weeks ago, I had made a suggestion that the hospital, there's never been a hospital blessing done. I mean, that we don't bless the spaces. And this came about in conversation with the surgery area, which is sterile, and chaplains don't often get in there because it's occupied with sterile stuff all the time, and we just can't get in there. And we're trying to make a deeper connection with the staff, the doctors and the nurses. And so we talked about just going there and standing at the door of the operating area and just doing a blessing of the space with our intention outside the space. And actually that was received by administration quite well. And so then a couple of weeks ago I said, well, if we could do it there, maybe we could do it through the whole hospital. And so we began to talk about how we might employ that. And so today, what we did, and we're going to do this the last last Monday of every month, we walked through the hospital and stopped. Today we stopped at all of the nursing stations, all the workspaces, all the offices, and stood there for a minute in silent meditation. Because this was the first time that we'd done it, a lot of people really didn't know what to do with this. And I had a sign, we agreed on a sign, it just says walking prayer, or prayerful walk, or something like that, just 2 words. And just carried that, and we had bell, and whenever we get to a space, we just kind of made a little brief introduction. Now next time, a month from the last Monday of February, what we will do is we will be all in silence. And unless somebody engages us, then we will just be a silent meditative walk throughout the whole space, trying to create a sense of calm, peace. A lot of people, because of budget cutbacks and staffing issues, there's a lot of stress on people. And it looks like, okay, Myokei's there. And so, and the feedback from today was many people were, in fact, we didn't experience any really sense of negativity about what we were doing, but most people were just like really excited that we would be present, we would be on their space, on their terms. It wasn't about our performance or our words, anything like that, but just to be there and for them. You know, some people even followed us so they could be with us a little bit longer. So it's an interesting experience how even in silence it does connect us. And while we were doing that, I had that thought that you shared, Myokei, that you know, much of what the silent meditative community engages in really seems to be self-oriented as opposed to directed out. And it's about what I can get, you know, what's in it for me, and don't bother me, don't intrude on my experience. And of course, the chanting helps break down that barrier. But yeah, that was a thought that occurred to me, and I was like, wow, okay, it's not the same thing. That's why we're sisters.
Well, and I think there's something to be said also for intentional silence. You know, one of the things I learned from the religious science folks is the buildup of sacred space. That, you know, even as you're speaking, and this might be another way to think of how you deal with anger, is to do affirmative prayer, to affirm the value, affirm the good of what's in the space. And so as you continue to think about it and to speak it and to give voice to it, the molecules move, something moves so that the space becomes sacred. The space becomes rich and full because we're speaking it into form. And that's something I think that if we think about affirming, you know, even our anger, affirming the existence of anger and its ability to make you move in such a way that you might not move if everything was calm. You know, I'm always reminded, and I still can't find this passage, where it says the mind is a fertile ground, so that we should be careful what we plant in it. And if we plant the idea that our ability to make a difference involves our willingness to affirm what we want to see, what we want to experience, then that's what will happen. But it demands that we understand the absolute power of our ability to make things happen. Most of us don't think so. You know, when you say, and science has supported this tremendously these days, that you keep hearing about it. But the idea that there's a connection between body and mind so that your mind can control the path of illness, for example. So you think your mind can also control the path of anger in your body. But you have to believe that, you have to know that. Because the minute that you have doubts, then that's what you affirm. You know, we tend to affirm the negative a lot of times when we're praying for things, or we're praying about something, and the idea we might say to ourselves, oh, this will never happen, but I'm really going to, you know, focus my intention and my prayers on this, but it's never going to happen. And you've already negated it. But if you really can understand the power of your mind in your life to transform situations, you can always affirm your ability to make it so. Kind of like Spock. But you know, the mind thing.
I think that was Picard, but
think about what?
I think that was Picard that said to make it so, but I could be mistaken.
That's right now, Spock. But you know, because you can deny the existence of what's negative in your life and make it go away. Think about that. And affirm the positive things that you want and make them manifest, appear. that if you can change your mind about what you think you can do, what you think you can influence, then you can really, in fact, change your whole world. And if we show up that way all the time, imagine what will happen.
I just wanted to ask if we've got a few minutes before the end of our stated scheduled time, and wanted to give you an opportunity to some closing remarks, and then we'll chant Odaimoku together 3 times and go ahead and sign off for the night.
Anybody have any final questions? Nope. So, let's see. One of my favorite lines comes from a poet named David White. And I'm going to leave you with this one because I think it's very deeply profound, where he says, "That is why you will not sing, afraid as you are as to who might join you. That is why you will not sing, afraid as you are as to who might join you." I think of us as instruments in a universal symphony or choir, and that if we lend our authentic voices and our authentic lives to making the world a better place, then we will have a greater impact because we will be joined by others who are also doing the same thing. That we must not ever be afraid to sing our own songs and make them true in the world.
If you wouldn't mind sharing that text with me, then I will add that to the description area in the video recording on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind.
The David White piece?
Yes, and anything else that you would like attached to the information.
Okay. All right.
Well, I would like to thank Myokei, Bishop Myokei Shonin, and for being with us tonight. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate Jim and Laurel for being here as well. And I do believe that finally we might have a fairly decent recording from these activities to actually post. And part of that is I've gotten some of the bugs worked out and managed to put something together. And anyway, I thank you all for your participation tonight, for your willingness to be here, and for the welcome and good spirit that you sent to Myokei for her joining us. And she'll be back in 2 weeks, so you can either be here or someplace else. Yeah. So let us go ahead and chant Odaimoku 3 times together. I am going to mute everybody. Hopefully I can do this. And I will mute everybody just so we don't get a lot of feedback going on. Namu Myo Renge Kyo, Namu Myo Renge Kyo, Namu Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you. I am very excited about finally getting Bishop Myokei to join with us at our temple and be able to do a presentation. So thank you all. Have a good night. And